In this lesson, we'll be finding the probability of compound events through the use of possibility diagrams. We've learned previously that the probability of event occurring is the number of outcomes favorable to the event over the total number of equally likely outcomes. So that is how we find probability. In the past, we've looked at probability of a simple event. In this video, we'll be learning about compound events. So that would show us two or more simple events. An example of a simple event would be flipping a coin. So if we flipped a coin once, that's a simple event. When we do it twice, that becomes a compound event now. Our first possibility diagram is a tree diagram. And this tree diagram shows us tossing a coin 2 times. So on our first toss, we could get heads, and on our second toss, we could also get heads, leaving us with the result of heads, heads. On our first coin, we could get heads, and then our second coin could be tails. That would leave us with heads, tails. Our first toss could have also been tails. Second toss, heads. That gives us tails, heads. Or we could end it with tails, tails. So if we flipped a coin 2 times, there are 4 possible outcomes. So if we're looking for a probability of flipping the coin twice and landing on heads and then tails, there's only one time that occurs, head first, then tails. So that's 1 out of a possibility of 4 total events. So the probability of event E occurring in this situation is 1 out of 4. In this next example, we're looking at a fair coin, which means heads and tails, and a fair 6-sided number die being tossed together. So that would be 1 through 6 on the sides. We want to find the probability of getting a heads and rolling a 5. So our first possibility model here, our first possibility diagram, this is a 2-way grid. And on the left side, we just have tails and heads. And then on the bottom here, we have 1 through 6. So this shows us how many total outcomes we could have. We could toss a heads and a 1, a heads 2, heads 3, heads 4, heads 5, heads 6, or we could toss a tails 1, then toss a tails 2, tails 3, tails 4, tails 5, tails 6. So there are 12 possible outcomes when you flip a coin and roll a die. We were looking for one specific one, which was heads, so that's this line right here on the grid. There's heads, and here's 5. So 5 heads brings us to that spot right there, or heads 5 brings us to that. There is only one possible outcome of that occurring. So the probability of this happening would be 1 out of 12. This table below is another possibility model that could represent this. So this possibility diagram is just set up in a table, and it's the same concept. We have heads, we have tails, and then we have the 6 possible outcomes of the number die. So it shows us again all 12 possible outcomes. Still a probability of 1 out of 12, just another way to show this here in a diagram. In our last example here, we are rolling 2 fair 6-sided number dice, and we want to find the probability that the sum of the 2 numbers rolled is a prime number. So if we roll 2 number die, we know that there are 6 possible outcomes on each. So if you have 6 outcomes on one die and then 6 on the other, that gives us a total of 36. When we multiply those possible outcomes, we're going to have something out of 36. And you could count all spots here if you want as well. You're still going to end up with 36. So the way this one was set up, our first toss was a 1, and our second toss was a 1. Well, if you add 1 and 1 together, that gives you 2. You have a 2 and a 1 gives you a total of 3, because again, we're looking for the sum of the 2 numbers. So when we roll the dice, these are all possible outcomes when you add up your numbers. We're looking for specifically prime numbers only for the sum. So our list of prime numbers, our biggest number here is 12. So we could work backwards. 12 is not prime. 11 is a prime number. 10 is not prime. 9 is not prime. 8 doesn't work. 7 is a prime number. 6 is not a prime number. 5 is. 4 is not. 3 is. And 2 is. So those are our 5 prime numbers. So now we want to go through our probability or our possibility diagram and see where 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, how many possible outcomes there are for that. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So it looks like there are 15 possible outcomes of rolling a prime number. When you roll 2 dice together and you add up their sum, you have a 15 out of 36 chance of rolling 2 dice that add up to be a prime number.